You are listening to a unique and special production of the 110-250 Audio Studio.
What's this, a daybird? A young bird? Who's the bird? Where is he?
So here we are.
Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino series in conjunction with the 110-250 Audio Studio with bandmate Dean Woods of the Kansas City power pop band, the Daybirds. As a part of a larger mission to capture the essence, history, and bravado of the late 90s, early 2000s band, we cover fertile ground. We talk to him from his home base in Kansas City to discuss his dreams as a kid, musical influences, the band's magic, the hits, near misses, and all the lore that went into this collective, according to Dean. Dig in.
Yes, sir.
What's going on?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm not bad. Not too bad. I'm just sitting out back 'cause it's so nice out, and so if you get some weird background noise, just let me know. I can move inside.
Oh, it's fine. First and foremost here, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I didn't really have anything specific. I mean, I was fortunate enough to grow up with parents that were like, you can do whatever you want to do. So they were just like dream big. So I was into everything. I was into sports and music and all kinds of shit. So I never really had like one specific thing. I guess in the 6th grade, I was voted most likely to be a stand-up comedian. So I guess that was probably my calling in life. But and I think I've achieved that for the most part. I'm still, a jackass. So, there was not one like particular, dream. I guess maybe a relief pitcher for the Royals, but other than that.
That's right. Try to get the Quisenberry down.
That's right.
Just for the context of everybody in the band, so we have geography down here, where are you originally from?
Kansas City, Missouri.
In the beginning, in your childhood, what was your baptism into music? What music was spinning? What did you get into? What gave you your early memories and formation of music?
Well, I grew up with 3 older brothers. So, and my oldest brother's 10 years older than I am. So, by the time I was 7 or 8 and really kind of had an understanding of what it was, I'd probably say my first, love of music was probably Queen. I just remember hearing that for the first time, thinking what the fuck is this madness? And from there, my mom loved music. So we listened to everything from Queen to ABBA to the Beatles to the Bee Gees. So, pretty much just loved all that 60s, 70s shit,
Well, and then that leads me into this. So when did you, actually before we get to that, what was the first live concert you saw?
The first live concert I saw?
Yeah.
Well, you got to keep in mind, I've only been to 2 concerts in my life, besides the ones that we played.
Yeah.
Because I was never really into going to big concerts. The crowds kind of freaked me out. But the first concert the first actual show I went to, this was before we were in the band, but Philly and I actually drove to Lawrence, Kansas to watch Ben Folds 5 Soundcheck at the Bottleneck. But it was a sold-out show, so we did not have tickets. So we were fortunate enough for them to let us in. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They let us in to listen to the soundcheck. And after the soundcheck was over, Ben came over with his, I guess would have been his tour manager, and we chatted, and we told him why we were there, and he put us on the guest list. So Phil and I got to stay and watch the actual show. So that was my first, real concert.
Nice. So, but at that point, what was Ben like? Was he, because that was before everything started taking off.
They blew up pretty quick after that. Their album was out, their song Underground was out, it was a big hit. I think they probably played Letterman not too long after that or some shit, but he was a fucking sweetheart. And he was super kind and nice, and from what I can tell, he seems like a genuine article.
When did the music start for you? What instrument did you pick up? When did you get that bug, that itch to play an instrument?
I remember my aunt and uncle had a upright piano, And I remember, being over there one time when I was probably like, I don't know, I was probably like 12 or 15 or something like that. And I was just kind of fucking around on it. I just kind of plucked out a song by ear and like played the melody line. And I was kind of like, what the fuck just happened? And I looked around and nobody was in the room, but I kind of realized then that I had a knack for pitch and I could play an instrument. I can't read music, but I can play by ear. So the piano was probably my first kind of forte into all of it. But like I said, I never really gave it a second thought. It never was like, oh, I'm going to be a musician one day. It was just something that I was, had a knack for. And I just it was no big deal really. So music didn't really, the idea of playing music in a band didn't really come around until, I guess I was probably like 22, something like that.
That was from my memory of things as I'm stitching this together and talking to everybody. You were in the Courthouse Project. Was that the first band, and then that segued into the Sky Kings?
Yeah, so the Courthouse Project was the first band I was in, and it was very short-lived. It was Sweetwood and I. Basically, at some point in time, John's parents bought a piano, and my wife gave me a ukulele, and John and I started kind of figuring out how to play music together. John could read music, but of course I couldn't, so it was just a bunch of clunking around, fucking with shit. And then a group of people that we hung out with, had coffee with, they were musicians, so we all kind of decided to literally go up to the courthouse in Liberty, Missouri, and plug in and just basically just hang out and jam and fuck around. And it turned into this actual group. And that's when, I realized at that point, like, oh, wow, I can actually write songs. So, that was kind of the first inclination that there was something there.
The incarnation, the band was you, Sweetwood, Philly, and Yeager. So how did all of that, from your recollection, kind of come into orbit and become what you guys would start doing with practicing and first song and then first show? How did all that start?
So John and I were in the Courthouse Project, and I think we were probably together, my memory's pretty fucking shitty, but 3 months, and we played one show. And then at some point I just decided that I just wasn't into it anymore. I mean, I don't even remember why. It just was kind of like, just wasn't my cup of tea anymore. And it wasn't like I was leaving it necessarily. Because my recollection is I didn't leave it just to go start my own band. It just kind of naturally happened. So I basically kind of hopped out of the Courthouse Project, and Philly and I actually hooked up for the very first time, just the two of us. And we were in his basement of his parents' house, and we actually wrote a song that night. I was like, okay, shit, there's something here. And it was a lot, and it was much more my jam than the Courthouse Project. It was much more pop-focused, melody-focused. Maybe like a week or so later, Yeager popped over with his drum kit, and I think that he was friends with Phil's little brother. They were close to the same age anyway, so that's kind of how we got that connection. And so we jammed a little bit. Sweetwood was still, I believe that he was still kind of technically in the Courthouse Project, but that band was kind of just, kind of going their separate ways. So then, John joined us. We kind of had something special and just ran with it.
So in the beginning, what was either the first song or first practices like? I mean, did you guys know pretty quick when you were together that there was chemistry and this was going where you wanted it to go?
Yeah, I think so. It was pretty quick. Like I said, Phil and I wrote a song our first night together. And then, when the two Johns came around not too shortly after and started kind of jamming with us, it just kind of all came together, with all the parts and pieces. And at that point in time, it was more traditional with Phil singing, me on guitar, John on bass, and Yeager on drums. So, but I don't recall the exact moment when we were like, oh yeah, we got to start a band together. But it just kind of happened and fell into place. We wrote a few more songs, and then we just kind of got to the point where it was like, okay, we're going to practice twice a week, and now we got to come up with a fucking name.
So we'll get to the Sky King's name because that all transitioned into Daybirds. But now this is going to be a bit of musical chairs because everybody's had their interpretation on this. But what do you remember about the very first show you guys played?
Well, shit, like I said, man, my memory's sketchy. I remember the first show for the Courthouse Project in general because I remember I was bartending at a country club and Sweetwood called me and said we have a show and I'm like, what are you talking about? I never even put two and two together. It never even occurred to me like we were that if you were in a band you had to play live. So, but with the Sky Kings, God, I cannot remember the very first show that we played. I remember one of the first shows that I can remember playing was at Davies Uptown. And I don't know if that was our first show or not, but I remember that show specifically because I had some friends come to the show from high school who had no idea that I was musically inclined. They kind of knew me more as like the athlete kind of guy. And now I'm doing this whole kind of separate thing. And so I think Philly and Sweetwood and Yeager were already kind of, they hung out with more of, I guess I would say, like an artsy crowd, so who were a little bit more accepting of that. But my buddies were kind of like, what's this nonsense? You're in a rock and roll band. What's that all about? But I remember that show being kind of nerve-wracking to me, but I don't remember what our first show was. What did the guys say?
Well, this is the thing, and this is going to stand to reason here, because probably somebody that would have the best memories would have been the person that wasn't drinking at the time and was the youngest. So it was Yeager, and he said that there was flyers that were put up on the Liberty Square. It was right after Fall Festival, and you played at a coffee shop, and there were so many people there that they had to open it up to two shows and split it up.
Well, I definitely remember playing that coffee shop, and I recall what he's talking about. I recall us playing and it being so busy that we played again. And that very well could have been our first show. I also remember we played a show at William Jewell College. I know that was one of our early shows too. So, but yeah, I would defer to that because, Yeager had more of his wits about him.
Yeah, and I still keep thinking about Yeager in those early days. He didn't drink. I remember the first time in our kitchen off Westport Road, he had his first shot at tequila, and now he's on Kelly Clarkson spinning drinks. So I'm wondering what happened in between.
Right. Well, even when Yeager became, even when we started touring and he was, of drinking age, which took a long time because he was, I think he was only 16 when we started the band. I don't recall him being one to, drink a lot.
No.
So no.
Yeah.
But yeah, that could very well be it. I mean, it definitely would have been something. It more than likely would have been something in Liberty because that's where we all lived at the time. So we'll just call that our first official show. Just put it in the book.
Yeah, that's right. You guys released the EP with the Sky Kings. Things were happening. You guys are playing locally. And then you get a letter in the mail about some band in Nashville.
Yeah, there's some band in Nashville that already has the name the Sky Kings. And when you're coming up with names, it's a hard thing. I just recall, I know I have a book. I have a bunch of shit down in my basement, in storage bins of all like the archived early shit, notebooks of songs, notebooks of us coming up with name ideas for our band. I just recall like reading a magazine and I saw like the word Sky above the word Kings in an article. And it was just like, Sky Kings. Oh, that's a fucking cool name. And, we just threw a "the" in front of it. And I just think that everybody was kind of like, yeah, that's great. I think it's cool. But yeah, we did get this we got this letter from this band in Nashville called the Sky Kings. I don't think it was a nasty gram or anything. It was just kind of like, hey, cut it out. And we were off to the new name search. So I guess we were the Sky Kings maybe for 6 months, something like that. I can't recall how long.
God, and I'm falling victim to that too, because I was kind of like, I was around all of that. I remember all the conversations because I was hanging with you guys and living there. So I remember it. It seems to me, when I think about the timeline of you guys, it seems like the Daybirds reign, the Sky Kings reign was a hell of a lot longer than it actually was. It seemed like it was almost halvesies, but it couldn't have been because you guys got that letter. And I remember you guys were like, fuck, we finally got traction. The shit's fucking moving in the right direction, and we have to change it up. But you guys did it pretty quick and kind of just switched train tracks, so to speak.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I mean we recorded our first album in '99, and it was under the Daybirds. You know, and we probably started the early '97, I guess it would have been. So we weren't the Sky Kings for too long. Maybe a year and a half. And I remember it kind of being a bummer, but at the same time, we all kind of were just kind of saw it as an opportunity to move on and just say fuck it.
And I don't think it's consequential to the timeline here between the Sky Kings and the Daybirds. But what were those shows like when you guys really were like in rhythm? Everything was going. What was it like? What was the feeling like when you guys were really going at it with these live shows at Davies and Jewel, and there was all kinds of shit going on at that time?
It was good, man. I mean, we were a good rock and roll band. I mean, we put the effort in. We rehearsed 2-3 times a week for, seems like 4 hours at a time. We were a tight band. So, and we had to be, because the fact that we all ended up switching instruments made it that much more difficult to kind of have a fluid show. So we had to be tight and had to have it down seamlessly. So yeah, when we were, I don't really recall, many bad shows, maybe 1 or 2, but, for the most part, we were just always clicking and going, and, and the crowd loved it. And I don't know, it was just kind of a magic happened.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That was one part of what I was thinking. There was a magic that happened. But the other thing, and I've been doing this ever since I thought about doing these interviews for like the last 3 or 4 weeks. I've been really listening to the catalog, and I actually have the Vegas songs in there, and I'm going through it, and I'm thinking about all of you guys and how you guys progressed from that first EP with the Sky Kings to Turnstile to You Rock to the desert songs that no one's really listened to. And I think about the evolution. You went more into a role of singing. You went to an electric uke. Other people were doing things they typically wouldn't have done in the early days. From your perspective, individually and band-wise, what was your take on the evolution of you guys? Because you guys did mature, you grew, your sound matured over time. What was your thought on that, how that happened for you guys?
I think it's just kind of a natural progression, I mean, when we first started out, we were all kind of in our individual roles and then, kind of doing our thing. I mean, I had an acoustic uke and Philly sang and John played bass and Jaeger played the drums. And then one night at rehearsal, I remember the way I recall it happening was I kind of heard a drum beat in my head and Jaeger, but I couldn't explain it to him. So I just said, well, let me just sit down and just kind of try and play it. Now, you got to keep in mind, I've never really played the drums before. So I just kind of sat down and played this drum lick that I was hearing. And he was just like, why don't you play the drums this song and I'll play guitar. That's when it kind of began. That kind of, that's when we really started to progress from like the kind of the Sky King sound to more of the Daybird sound, because everybody just brought their own flair to whatever instrument they played. And then, just naturally from there, I think you just progress and just, tighten up your music and just change things up. We were pretty poppy to begin with, and it kind of became more, a little bit just more straight rock and roll, but still with that kind of pop influence.
Well, and the one thing too, and I didn't have this in the original questions, but some of these are going to evolve as we talk. The one thing too was that Philly was kind of he was the veteran by the time he got in there with you guys. He had tasted that fame on a big stage and had albums and all that. What was that like knowing, I mean, was that comforting to know that Philly had all of that clout and he was kind of a part of this vehicle that was moving towards something bigger?
Well, I mean, obviously, Phil had the most experience of all of us in a rock and roll band, and the motherfucker could sing the songbook. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of gave us a little bit of gravitas. You know what I'm saying? So we just weren't 4 young pucks just fucking around.
Talk to me a little bit about there was evolutions, there were stages and things that were happening. Talk to me about that time period around Turnstile and when Dennis Rodriguez came in. What was that whole thing like?
Yeah, so we recorded Turnstile up in Lawrence, and obviously it was a big record. It was 18 songs or some shit like that. So it was definitely enough for 2 albums. So once that came out, that really helped us a lot. We got a lot of great reviews, got a lot of good, momentum and, shows from it. If I recall, Dennis kind of worked with a mutual friend of ours, and I think our friend was playing our disc, and he overheard it. And that's kind of how he got involved with it. So we met up with him, and he just kind of wanted to represent us, and we were like, all right, this guy's offering some soup. Let's do it.
It was obviously, and I talked to Dennis too, and I got a better idea. Obviously it was a management thing, but and when he did take you guys, I mean, you guys went to Montreal, you guys went to LA, you guys went to Vegas. But when you think about the timeline and history of Dennis, what did he do? What was it that was instrumental about his management when he caught you guys and took you on? What was that like?
From my perspective, we kind of, it's still situation normal for us for the most part. We were just out playing shows. I mean, I think Dennis might have helped us out from think about yourselves as an act and tightening up your performance and think about things from stage presence and that kind of point of view. Dennis was really this guy that kind of had a lot of great connections in music, and he was kind of doing his own thing. He had a job. So we were just kind of working it from both sides of the fence. So of course he hooked us up with, the whole Celine Dion hookup and, going to Montreal to record and Vegas to record, and putting us in front of some people.
The one thing I think about too was you guys really came in before the pre-social media, kind of the pre-digital age of kind of taking control of your own life and kind of pushing it further. But wasn't there something, like now that you look back on it, wasn't there something that was good about the fact that if anybody wanted your music, they had to physically buy it? And it wasn't one of those things where you could stream it or download it or whatever. I mean, didn't that kind of add to the amount the crowds came in and just the entirety of what you guys were doing at the time?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, I mean, obviously we didn't know any different. So, we didn't have the benefit of, Spotify and iTunes. And I imagine if we did, that we would have been on those platforms. No, there was something nice about it that, somebody had to come to a show and, go up to the merch table and buy a CD or, they could, we had some sort of online ordering system. I can't recall what it was, but, Sweetwood and I were constantly fulfilling orders and, shipping out discs.
As we lead up to, what was the lead up to that conversation with Renee, when there was supposed to be a decision you guys thought were going to go a different way? What kind of led up to that conference call, and what was kind of an expectation as a band that was going to happen when that went down? Well,
I don't recall a conference call. Are you talking about a conference call with Renee?
Yeah, there was, from what I remember, there was a call and there was supposed to be a decision, and it was going to kind of be, a big moment for you guys as far as like a management deal.
Gotcha. Well, obviously we were hoping for a management deal of some sort, which obviously never happened. I don't recall. I mean, I'm sure there was a conference call. I don't necessarily recall it, but yeah, I mean, I guess in our heads, we were thinking like, okay, we've been doing this for a long time. We're slugging away. We got our foot in the door, and and then but it's the music business. Things just take a turn sometimes for. In somebody's case, good fortune, and somebody it's not good fortune. So
the other thing about it, and Evans even said this, was there was that split between people that are creative that are making the music and people that are in skyscrapers with suits on. Like, these guys just aren't going to get it. They weren't going to get you. No matter what, there was a chance that this door was going to close instead of open. And at the end of the proverbial day, you guys did something that was, like you said, it was fucking magical, and these guys just didn't get it.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's at the same time, it's just it's the same story for thousands and thousands of bands out there. So many great, we played with so many great artists who were super talented, and it's just a matter of, it's just, good fortune and good luck. But yeah, I would agree with Evans. I mean, obviously there's people that, are making decisions, and, you can put 7 years into something that somebody makes a decision on in 5 seconds. And it can have nothing to do with anything more than this guy's buddies with this guy, So it just goes to show you kind of how crazy the business is. I mean, Dennis had, the ear of Renee and lots of great connections, but things just go in a different direction sometimes.
Well, yeah, and Renee had the ear of a lot of other people too. So I mean, yeah, there's so much that goes into it. There's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing that's 1D, 2D, even 3D about it.
Well, and I think it's the kind of thing. It's the kind of thing at the time. You can't comprehend it at the time because you're kind of in it. But I think once you're away from it for a while, you can kind of, wrap your head around it, I guess, so to speak.
And I think that's a part of this process of having a retrospective and looking into that era of the Sky Kings and the Daybirds. It's like there's so much of that in the rearview mirror that starts making sense. That kind of comes,
right.
It's just revelations. But so after that decision was made, you obviously have to continue to move on. What was kind of happening with the band? What was kind of the mode, and how did things evolve after that decision?
I think that for the most part, there was probably just kind of probably a bit of a sense of deflation on different levels. I think everybody kind of felt their different level of like being bummed out by not taking the next step yet. But I think things were still kind of going along. We were, if my timing's correct, I think that's about the time that we were going over to. We were spending a lot of time at Evan's studio recording music. I don't even know how many songs we recorded with Evans between the time that the deal didn't work out and the time that the band kind of dissolved. But there's, a shit ton of songs in the can that, haven't seen the light of day. And hell, I haven't heard them for years either because, they're probably on some, fucking beta disc somewhere in Evan's basement.
Yeah. With that being said, obviously a part of this band was there was an era where Phil was in there and there was an era where John Evans was in there. What happened? How did all of that happen? How did that door close and open and transition into a different version of a band?
That all kind of happened, fairly quickly at the same time. So it wasn't like it was, Phil wasn't in the band and then Evans was in the band for 5 more years. This all kind of happened fairly quickly if my timing's correct. But, I think it just kind of got to the point where, Philly wasn't, I wouldn't say he was unhappy, but I would say that probably the music just wasn't very fulfilling for him anymore. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I think it wasn't. So like I said, it wasn't, we got along, me and the guys got along thick as thieves, and we still would today if we got in the room together. So I don't think there was anything about that. But I think it just kind of got to the point where Phil just, is probably just not feeling super fulfilled with the music, maybe the direction of the music, and we kind of recognized it. I don't recall it being a big intervention kind of conversation. It seemed like, I can't remember if Phil approached us or we approached him, and we could say, "Hey, this seems like you're not very happy," type of thing. So it was nothing mean spirited or anything by any, as far as I can recall. I just think that Phil just wanted to kind of, move on and take a break from it, and like I said, at the time we were recording at Evan's studio, and he was in a band that I think was kind of coming to an end as well. So he kind of just, we kind of just made him the fifth Daybird, so to speak.
It's like you said before with that phone call with Dennis, or that decision that was made. There's so much shit that goes into these decisions, and when you look at it in hindsight, you just start seeing the myriad of things. But the reality of you guys is that you guys are all individuals that were getting older, and you got married, and other people were getting into relationships, and other people had spirituality things, and there was all these things, and that's the reason why we had VH1 Behind the Music, because all of this shit festers, and then you guys are together, pretty much all the time. So there's a level of you guys that goes through compression and decompression. You guys are evolving and growing. So by natural osmosis, fucking bands do this shit all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's tough. You're a family and you're together all the time and you're playing music all the time, and then it just gets to a point where people start just having different thoughts and feelings about it. People want to kind of do their own thing or just want to move on, or I think that I mean, probably the Daybirds' greatest weakness was our greatest strength was the fact that we were all songwriters. We could have all been in our own band. I think it just kind of gets to the point where after a while you're kind of like, maybe I can go do my own thing and, write my own songs. If this isn't working out, let me try something different.
So I guess that's a natural lead into my next question, which is when was it that you guys all said, look, it's time. We have to move on. We have to kind of like figure out, do something different with our lives.
Well, I don't remember there being an actual, hey guys, let's break up the band moment. I'm pretty sure we only played one live show after Phil left, and it was our last show, and it was with Evans, and it was at the Hurricane in Kansas City. We had no idea it was going to be our last show. It obviously was kind of a bummer that it ended up being our last show because, we play all these years and then our last show is without Phil. I don't recall it, I think it was more of like, it kind of felt more like we were just going to take a break for a while and just kind of see what happens. But I don't recall it being a big conversation about the band breaking up.
Now that everything's been said and done, I mean, we're looking at 20 years. It's a long time. And there's been obviously a lot that's gone into this. And one of the reasons why I want to do this is because I think there's enough people out there that recognize the might of you guys as a band and remember the music and remember all of this. So with that being said, that naturally lends to the idea that there is a legacy. The Daybirds left behind a legacy, whether people believe it or not. But if you think about it, you lean back in the easy chair and you think about the legacy of this band, what comes to mind? What's a natural gut punch to you that says this was the Daybirds?
Oh shit, man, I don't know. It's like probably if I just kind of think back on it, just would be at the time. I mean, obviously at the time you can't really think about it this way, but in reflection, just we played so many shows in front of so many people that loved our music, and it would be interesting to be able to find out like how many people we influenced that went off to be in their own bands, who thought if these guys could do it, I can do it, type of thing. So I would imagine that we probably influenced a lot of younger people to kind of get into music themselves.
And that was what I was thinking too, because one of the things, I was very close to a lot of this, not only because we were all tight, but I was at a lot of shows. What stands out to you with like people that maybe went out and played music because of you guys? What stands out with you with the fans? Was there super fans? What was it like when did people follow you from place to place? What do you remember about the Daybirds fans?
Well, I mean, we had a lot of great fans. I mean, I can't, I obviously can't remember, maybe an individual's name, but we had every city we went to, we'd have, we'd always draw a lot of people, but we'd always have that core group of people who were, I don't know, 20, 30 people, and they were great. I mean, we would, I mean, on a lot of cases, we'd crash on their floor, But no, we had a bunch of loyal fans. Obviously, we couldn't have done it without them. As far as like remembering who they are exactly individually, kind of a, memory loss.
Yeah, well, and it's more of a feeling too,
right?
Because I remember seeing a lot of the diehards, and it was like straight up, these were people that were going to follow you guys around and be there.
Oh yeah.
Obviously now after all this time, decades have gone by. We're going into the 50s, and there's all of these things that you think about in your life. When you think about, the one thing that was the cornerstone of you guys was that it was a friendship. You guys had a band, but at the end of the day, you guys did it because ultimately you guys were friends. It was like and Phil even said as much. This was fun. This was a fucking good time. So when you think about that legacy and everything, and we all moved to different cities and different places, is there anything that's been left unsaid or unresolved, or is it like that was it and this is where we're at right now?
I don't think I don't think there's anything that's unresolved. Like I said, we got along great. We had a blast. We had a lot of fun. I can't really think of anything that was left unresolved for me personally.
Let me ask you this. Let's say in a couple weeks from now you get a phone call, middle of the day, and someone says, we got a place. Do you guys want to get together and play again? What would you say?
Well, I mean, shit, man. I mean, I would never say never. I'm not the kind of person that just closes the book on something,
Yeah.
But, that being said, I don't necessarily think it's something that I'd be interested in doing right now. It's not really something that's on my radar. I would never say never, obviously. Obviously you're talking about a perfect storm coming together.
Yeah.
It would be, obviously it'd be just a logistical nightmare of it all. Like, just us remembering how to even play parts, and do we still own instruments, and, and we live in different cities, and how do we rehearse, and all of those things, so it would be a big undertaking. I mean, if we all lived in the same town, and it could be one of those things that could be a little bit easier, I guess, but it's easier said than done for sure.
Well, and I guess that's a part of that question. There's so many things that go into it. There's different cities, there's different things going on. Everybody's kind of in a different trajectory, but,
Right.
I guess it was more of like hypothetically speaking. So, all right,
Good to
Dean,
me.
I appreciate it.
All right, man, I appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, brought to you by the 110-250 Audio Studio, where we give you a fresh and comprehensive insight into the finest musicians in the world. Thanks to Dean for reliving a period of existence that is over 20 years old. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on both iTunes and Spotify. Swing by the Neon Jazz channel at YouTube. And for all things relatable or forgotten, jump over to joedimino.com. Until next time, enjoy the music out there.
What's this, a daybird? A yard bird? Who's the bird? Where is he?